There's a type of person who makes you feel like you're their light until they suddenly disappear. No explanation, no closure, just silence, a silence that feels like a wall you can't see through. You ask yourself, do they really care, or are they just manipulating me? This isn't an easy question, especially when the person has an avoidant attachment style. The heart of an avoidant isn't cold. It's just protected, layered with old wounds, memories of being smothered, controlled, or emotionally unsafe. Avoidants don't pull away because they can't love. They pull away because love feels disorienting. Intimacy threatens their sense of self, and withdrawal becomes a way to preserve their inner peace. But here's the truth. Not everyone with avoidant tendencies is manipulative. And not every manipulator is a narcissist. The truth lies in a fine, often invisible line between unconscious fear and intentional control. Today's video will reveal 5 clear signs to help you understand whether you're dealing with an avoidant, struggling with their wounds, or someone using narcissistic tactics to maintain power. If you've ever been ghosted, gaslighted, or stuck in a push-pull connection that keeps you emotionally confused, this video is for you. Hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and stay with me till the end, because clarity might just be your first step toward emotional freedom and reclaiming your worth. When a relationship ends and you choose silence, cutting all communication, no texting, no checking social media, no emotional signals, you may think the avoidant will immediately realize how important you were. But contrary to what you feel, the very first thing an avoidant attachment style experiences is not pain, it is relief. A sense of having escaped something overwhelming. A breath of release, as if the pressure to maintain emotional closeness has finally lifted. Because why? Avoidants do not process emotions the way most people do. Their nervous system, conditioned since childhood to shut down as a survival mechanism, responds to a breakup by instantly turning off emotional signals. Before they can feel anything deeply, their defense system has already taken over. They numb themselves, disconnect internally, shut down the signals of longing, and settle into silence as if it were the safest place in the world. They are not lying when they say, "I need space." For them, silence is how they breathe, how they stabilize, how they prevent themselves from drowning in feelings they don't know how to handle. This explains why the early period of no contact while you are panicking, hurting, analyzing, feels strangely peaceful for them. They can return to work, laugh with friends, or post pictures as if nothing happened. But don't be mistaken, this is not because you didn't matter. It's because they have not allowed themselves to feel yet. Avoidants experience emotions on delay. Their grief and longing do not surface at the breakup moment. They surface when consequences appear. And that moment comes much later. At this stage, they still believe you will return. You've always been the one who tried, who reached out, who repaired things. In their mind, you are the one who stays. You are the one whose heart does not give up easily, and this assumption gives them a deep, quiet sense of certainty. Your silence, at first, feels like a temporary pause, not a permanent withdrawal. But then, something shifts. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks pass, still no message from you, no reaction, no sign of life, no emotional signal. And this is the moment the internal transformation begins. What once felt peaceful now begins to feel strange, empty, in a way they did not expect. A restlessness creeps in, subtle but undeniable. Not because love suddenly awakens, but because something more foundational is being threatened. Their sense of emotional control. They always assumed they could distance themselves and you would close the gap. They believed they could retreat and you would bridge the silence. That was their emotional safety net. But now you are not doing that, and your silence starts to speak louder than words. No messages means you're not chasing anymore. No efforts means you might be letting go. And for an avoidant, this is not merely losing a partner, it is losing the silent emotional affirmation that they still mattered to someone. Their mind begins to construct scenarios. Are you texting someone else? Is there someone new? Have you really moved on? They feel anxiety, but they won't show it. It appears quietly, in the way they check their phone, reread old conversations, or scan your online presence to see if you're still attached. They do not call this missing you. They tell themselves it's just a thought. But in truth, this is the first moment you begin to re-enter their emotional world, not through action, but through absence. The longer your silence holds, the more their defense system begins to crack. There is no longer a familiar dynamic to hide behind, no one to push away, no one to resist. And in that emotional vacuum, something finally emerges: awareness, emotional recognition. They no longer feel relief. They begin to feel off balance, uneasy, destabilized. Because when silence ceases to be a safe zone and becomes a threat, every part of their emotional strategy begins to collapse. And right here, when your absence no longer feels like peace, but like a loss they cannot articulate, is the moment an avoidant begins to want to return. Not because they are healed, not because they suddenly understand everything, but because they can no longer tolerate the possibility that they have lost emotional significance to someone who once loved them so deeply and unconditionally. Here's a common misconception: that the avoidant returns because they realize they lost a deep, irreplaceable love. But the truth is much more complex. They don't come back because the heart awakens. They come back because the ego is threatened, because the internal defense structure begins to crack, and that crack doesn't start with love, it starts with fear, the fear of no longer being important. Within every avoidant lies an unconscious need to feel emotionally significant in someone's world. They don't need constant messages, affection, or daily contact, but they do need to believe that, even if you're hurt or angry, they still occupy space in your emotional mind. So when you go silent, no messages, no reactions, no signals, it strikes straight into their deepest fear. Maybe I no longer matter. And that's when the ego begins to break. Quietly, subtly, like a slow internal fracture. They feel uneasy, but can't name it. A strange emptiness grows. No control, no predictability. They begin to check, revisit your profile, watch your stories, scroll through old messages. Not because they miss you, but because they must confirm that they still exist in your emotional orbit. They need to know you haven't detached, that you're still thinking of them. But you're not. You're silent, still, grounded. And now, they feel it: the void. Not the loss of love, but the loss of emotional power. And this becomes the emotional tipping point. They ask themselves, does she still love me? Has she really moved on? Do I still matter to her? These questions don't arise from romantic longing. They arise from ego disruption. You might think they're coming back out of love, but the truth is, they're reaching out because they can no longer tolerate the loss of emotional control. They don't come back to love you deeper, they come back to check whether they still matter. The message they send isn't an invitation for reconnection, it's a probe, a test, a whisper from a fearful ego. Am I still important? At this moment, your silence stops being a pause, it becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, they finally see the truth. You are starting to live better without them. No rage, no begging, no drama, just a quiet strength that screams, I chose myself. And that's when they crack, not because love has bloomed, but because their defense system has lost its anchor. When there's no one left to avoid, they are forced to face themselves, and in that moment, they act. They reach out, they test the waters, they check in, But don't be mistaken, this is not yet a heart awakening. It's still ego-driven. The moment they lost emotional influence over you is the moment they lost their grip, and that's what makes them feel out of control. You may receive their return with compassion, caution, or closure. But remember this: the moment they came back doesn't prove how much you mattered. It proves you stopped giving them that power, and that is what truly unsettled them. When you receive a message from an avoidant after a long period of silence, your heart may waver. You might think, have they changed? Did they finally realize something? Is this a new beginning? But the truth is rarely that romantic, because the message isn't a love confession, it's a test. A way to see if you're still soft, still emotionally attached, still keeping them at the center of your world. Messages like, "Hey, how have you been? I was just thinking about you, just checking in to see if you're okay," sound gentle, even caring. But in reality, they come from a place of deep internal insecurity and a fear of being erased from your emotional world. They're not reaching out because they understand your pain. They're not coming back because they've matured emotionally. They're reaching out because they sense you're truly pulling away, not just through actions, but energetically, and that terrifies them. No one's reacting anymore. No one's missing them in the mornings. No one's hurt by their absence. For an avoidant, that's not freedom, that's an identity crisis. You see, in the avoidant's inner world, connection isn't something they consciously crave, it's something they need to confirm their emotional significance. As long as you message, try, complain, or express hurt, they know they still exist in your emotional space. But when you go silent, grounded, free, they feel you're erasing their role in your world, and that's unbearable for them. So that message, which may look like a gesture from the heart, is actually a reflex from a wounded ego. It holds no commitment, it carries no transformation. It has one purpose only: to check if you've truly let go. This is where you must be more clear-eyed than ever. Not to be angry, but to see clearly. You are no longer the person who needs to overanalyze every message. You no longer need to ask, do they mean it this time? Because healing has gifted you with discernment. You can respond if you choose to. But you'll respond with clarity, not craving. You'll set boundaries, not surrender your soul. You'll listen to not just what they say, but why they're saying it. And most importantly, you now know you don't need them to come back to know that you are worthy of love. So when they return, remember, this is not a happy ending, it's your final test. There's something few people realize when dealing with an avoidant. Their message isn't the end, it's just the first door into an internal emotional dialogue. And that dialogue, if you maintain your silence and boundaries, won't unfold the way they're used to. Because for the first time, the avoidant no longer holds emotional power. They send the message, perhaps hoping for a response. But when you don't react the way you used to, something strange begins to stir inside them. Memories start to warm. The very things that once felt suffocating your long gaze, your daily check-ins, your consistent presence, they once labeled as too much, now begin to feel like safety they quietly long for. A familiar song, your voice in an old video, the scent of a perfume, these become emotional gateways they can't shut. They once ran from intimacy because it felt like a loss of control. But now, with your absence from their emotional field, those small memories once overlooked become fragments of warmth they begin searching for. And here's the shift. They lose power. They're no longer controlling the distance. They're no longer sure of their place in your heart. Your silence is no longer the space they asked for. It's the uncertainty that makes them feel unsafe. And this is the turning point. When they no longer control you, they are forced to feel. Forced to look back. Forced to face the emptiness they once masked with detachment. There's no one waiting after their retreat anymore. No emotional safety net called you. And it's at this moment that the avoidant so used to emotional numbness starts to feel an inner pressure. Not because they've fully awakened, but because they are now being led by a new emotion. The emotional discomfort of lost control. There's a question almost everyone who has loved an avoidant has asked themselves, are they coming back for me or just because they can't handle not being needed anymore? And the honest answer is often more complicated than we wish. Avoidants don't return because they've suddenly realized how much you mean to them. They come back because they've lost control over a connection they thought was safely in their hands. They don't wake up because of love, but because their internal emotional order has been disrupted. They're no longer the ones who get to decide when to come close and when to pull away. In the avoidant's inner world, love and control are often confused. They feel secure knowing you'll always be there, always forgiving, always waiting, always loving unconditionally. But when you stop responding, when your silence becomes steady and unshakable, they're forced to face a truth they never considered. You chose yourself. And that choice, quiet, powerful, unwavering, is what shakes them. Not the love you gave. This doesn't mean they feel nothing. But it does mean their return is not born from mature love, but from the fear of losing their emotional significance in your life. It's the fear of losing influence. The fear of no longer occupying that psychological space they once held. They used to believe you'd always be the one to reconnect, but this time you didn't. And in that moment, they're not trying to rebuild love, they're trying to reassure a panicked ego. So stay aware. Don't mistake a simple message for deep transformation. A real return, if it happens, only begins when the avoidant stops running from their own emotions. When they learn to stay, to feel, and to take emotional responsibility rather than using distance as a tool to stay in control. If not, their return is just another loop where you keep hoping and they keep avoiding. This is a fragile moment. The avoidant returns, and even if you've done a lot of inner work, your heart still stirs. Because their return hits a familiar spot. The part of you that once waited, once loved deeply, once longed for change. But this isn't the same story anymore. Now, you are different. You are not someone who gives in easily, who idealizes pain, or forgets yourself for connection. You're someone who is learning to live authentically, to love yourself, and to set boundaries. So when the avoidant comes back, your first response should not be from your heart, but from your clarity. Am I willing to go back into the cycle, or do I want something real, mutual, and emotionally mature? Here's what someone on a healing journey should do. 1. Don't respond immediately. Breathe. Before replying, take time to check in with your feelings. Are you reacting from nostalgia, from loneliness, or because you truly believe they've changed? 2. Observe their motive, not just their message. Are they coming back for you or to soothe their fear of being forgotten? The message may seem sweet or gentle, but watch for consistent behavior, not emotional sparks. 3. Ask questions instead of giving access. Instead of reopening your heart, ask, what have you learned since we last spoke? Why are you reaching out now? Are you ready to take emotional responsibility? An avoidant who hasn't healed will likely avoid these very questions. 4. Check actions, not promises. A truly changed person won't just say, I miss you. They will. Apologize for the hurt caused. Avoid pulling emotional strings. Respect your new boundaries. Stay present even when emotions get uncomfortable. 5. Choose from clarity, not craving. You don't have to cut them off coldly, but you can stand firm, hold your value, and only allow reconnection if you see genuine change on their part. And if you're not sure, remember, Not responding is a powerful response. A I have to is C. A I have to is 80. A have to is at. Your intentional silence is the mirror that reflects the truth. Who is ready for real connection and who just wants to feel important again? Not everyone who returns after silence has grown. And not every avoidant is ready to face their real emotions. Most come back out of fear of losing the role they once held, not because they've awakened to the true value of love. So if you're someone who once carried the weight of patience, of empathy, of waiting, you have every right to ask yourself, is this a repeat of the past or the beginning of something new? The answer doesn't lie in their promises, their eyes, or late-night messages. It lies in subtle, yet powerful signs, the kind that only a heart that has learned responsibility can truly express. The first sign is clear acknowledgement without justifications, without blame. They don't say things like, "I was under pressure," or "I needed space," as excuses for disappearing. Instead, they say, "I know my silence hurt you. I didn't know how to deal with emotions then, but I'm learning to do better now." They are no longer ashamed of their wounds because they've begun to accept themselves both the weakness and the responsibility. The second sign is that they don't rush you to take them back. They don't pressure you into forgiving or reopening your heart. Instead, they take time to listen, to understand what they once overlooked, and they accept that trust must be rebuilt, not demanded. Third, they stay through discomfort. If in the past they disappeared when you were in pain, now they can look into your eyes when you speak of your hurt. They can sit in silence with you without feeling burdened by it. They begin to share their own emotions, not to manipulate or impress you, but to truly connect. They ask about your feelings, and they can handle your honesty, your vulnerability, things they used to avoid. The fourth sign, they respect your boundaries. No more silent treatments, no more disappearing acts followed by sudden returns like you're just a resting stop for their insecurity. They keep their word, even the small ones. They no longer expect your heart to soften easily. They understand that your softness was once something they misused, and now they return to rebuild, not to test you. And finally, they don't just want you, they want to grow with you. They're not returning because you fill a void. They're returning because they realize you deserve a healthy connection, and they want to be someone safe enough to hold that with you. Not because you changed them, but because your absence forced them to face the parts of themselves they had long denied. And when they stand before you now, you don't need words. You only need to feel. Do you still feel tense? Are you still trying to decode them? Or are you finally being seen? Do you feel peace? Or just the illusion of it because you're afraid of losing them again? That answer is your compass. Because healing isn't found in their return, it's found in the fact that you no longer need them to feel whole. And if they have truly changed, they will honor that wholeness, instead of trying to break into it just to regain the sense of power they once held. This is not a story of two people getting back together. This is the story of someone who has finally learned how to live truthfully with emotion, and if both people have learned that, then love may have a chance to blossom again, not from old wounds, but from mutual growth. This is the pivotal moment, not when they come back, not even when they change, but when you no longer need them to feel safe, whole, or worthy. In the past, your love may have leaned toward sacrifice. You loved them with your entire heart, with forgiveness, with patience that exceeded your limits. You hoped they would see that love and choose to stay, to love you the way you deserved. But now, after cycling through waves of emotional turmoil, you've returned to yourself whole, complete, without needing anyone to validate it. You realize a trustworthy partner isn't someone who says loving words, but someone who remains present when emotions get heavy. You no longer fantasize about a better version of them. You no longer try to see their potential as an excuse to tolerate mistreatment. You see them for who they are, and more importantly, you see yourself clearly too. You don't choose to reconnect in order to fill a void, because now there is no void to fill, as you've learned how to befriend yourself, your solitude, even your old wounds. And from that, you come to a deep truth. Healing was never about whether they came back. It was about no longer begging for love. Now, if you choose to open your heart again, it's a conscious choice, not a reaction rooted in fear of abandonment. If you walk away, it's not out of bitterness, but because you know that peace cannot survive in a connection that constantly makes you question your worth. The moment you stop needing love from another to feel that you deserve it, is the moment you truly free yourself from emotional dependence. You become the very light you once begged someone else to bring you. And if an avoidant truly loves you, they won't try to possess that light. Instead, they will learn how to ignite their own, so you can walk together as two healed souls. In the end, the journey with an avoidant is not about learning how to keep them, how to change them, or how to prove your worth. It's about realizing who you've become after all the pain. If they come back, it might not be love, but a reaction from their ego losing its familiar validation. If they stay silent, it doesn't mean you're not enough, but that they may not be mature enough to face real intimacy. Regardless of the outcome, you now hold the power to choose. Choose peace, choose clarity, choose yourself. Avoidants are not villains. They're often guided by deep, unnamed fears. But you're not obligated to be the one to heal them. Your responsibility is to heal yourself. And once you do, you no longer chase love, you become it. Real love never asks you to abandon yourself in order to be seen. It isn't about emotional games, withholding affection, or silent punishment. True love is when two people walk toward each other not from fear of loss, but from a clear recognition of the value of connection. So, if you're at the end of this chapter, remember, the greatest victory isn't making someone come back. It's knowing you're worthy of a mature, secure, and healthy love. And if someone can't offer you that, then walking away isn't a failure, it's a triumph of inner freedom.